One of the recommendations that OECD made and other international organizations as well is for Romania to lower its deficit by enhancing compliance and generating more revenues at this point. How do you believe Romania can do that? Can we take into consideration increasing taxation next year, maybe increasing the quota of VIT next year?
Clearly the budget position is in significant deficit, and the trajectory for public debt is that it is increasing, and it's at a time when fiscal pressures, when spending pressures, both structural and in terms of short-term external factors, are increasing. And Romania's tax revenue as a share of GDP is comparatively low. It's been trending down compared to what it was, and it's certainly well below OECD standards. Now, there are different things that we believe Romania should be doing. Certainly, enforcing compliance with existing laws is important, and there are improvements that ought to be made in terms of using the use of digital technology, automation of tax collection, and generally improving the quality of tax law enforcement. That's certainly important. We do believe that Romania should remove quite a number of the exemptions for which there are not good reasons, exemptions from personal income tax, exemptions from corporate income tax, and also some exemptions when it comes to VIT. Good tax policy means that taxes are efficient, least distorting in the economy, that they're growth friendly, but that they're also fair and equitable. So, I mean, right now our view is that in Romania there is scope to look at the level of tax, but also to look at the tax mix and how the tax system is designed, and that is certainly something that we are putting forward as part of our review.
I saw in the report, but also on your statement earlier, and the fact that most OECD countries have progressive taxation. It's a recommendation even for Romania to take that into consideration. Why should we take that into consideration?
The tax and transfer system in Romania can be improved. As I've said earlier, a good tax system is a system that is efficient, that is least distorting in the economy, that least detracts from economic growth and development opportunities, where there is reward for effort and reward for risk taking, but where there is also a focus on fairness and equity of the system, where through the tax system some of the inequalities of opportunities within the broader society are adjusted, and progressive taxation is one way that can be done. But the other area, I guess, in Romania that we believe the government should look at is there's a very high level of social contribution rights, which impacts in particular on the cost of employment for low income workers. There is too high a proportion of people that are currently outside the formal system in the informal system, because the fixed cost of social contributions as part of the overall income is having too big an impact on take-home pay.
I'm going to insist on the answer regarding the increase of the VIT.
Well, there's not a blanket answer to this. I mean, so when it comes to VIT, the first priority should be to broaden the base.
For many years, Romania has considered having a personal income tax of 10% and a corporate income tax of 16%. As well as having a cheap labor force of one of its strengths in attracting foreign investors. At this point, things are about to change. Increasing taxation is unavoidable at this point, and there's pressures in increasing the salaries because workers are harder to find. What do you believe that Romania's strengths are at this point, and what can we do to get new strengths in attracting private investors?
Well, firstly, it comes down to balance. I mean, it's quite right when designing a tax system to focus on making sure that tax system is as growth friendly as possible. It's also important to generate the necessary revenue for government in an efficient, least distorting way, and in a way that is fair and equitable, to invest in education, skills development, and all of the things that will continue to make the workforce in Romania competitive for the future. And for that, the government has to give itself the fiscal resources to be able to do that.
If we're to move on from the fiscal point, how can Romanian authorities find other ways in order to help the business environment, or at least not to hinder it?
Well, Romania can make efforts to be, dare I say, to create an even more business-friendly environment. One, by being predictable and by ensuring that there is certainty when it comes to public policy settings, whether that is tax or in relation to other matters. And I hasten to add that doesn't mean not making any changes or not pursuing any reforms, but it goes towards how changes and reforms are implemented with proper consultation, proper stakeholder engagement, and that businesses and investors can see and understand what changes are coming and why and how they're going to be implemented. It's going to be important to continue down that path of strengthening anti-corruption and the public integrity framework. In the end, I mean, it's a whole range of different factors that will have to come together to continue to boost public investment. And I believe that in private investment, through the OECD accession process, and as investors and businesses see Romania going through the accession process, it's a very systematic and rigorous way of aligning with all of the high standards and best practices that are internationally recognized, and that will help Romania and its brand internationally when it comes to attracting investment.
I would like to talk now a little bit about the energy sector and the climate policy. One of the recommendations OECD makes in the report is increasing energy tax rates and phasing out fossil fuel subsidies to incentivize low carbon behavior. Could you please expand on that?
If you want to achieve net zero emissions, and Romania says it wants to achieve net zero emissions by 2050, then you need to ensure that through your policy settings you incentivize the right behavior and you disincentivize the wrong behavior. We're suggesting there shouldn't be public subsidies that effectively distort behavior to pollute more. Firstly, fossil fuel subsidies are very expensive, and they are applied in too broad a fashion. I mean, so many people are receiving the benefit of fossil fuel subsidies that don't really need it, and as I say, it is distorting behavior. Instead of driving reductions in emissions, it actually encourages a continuation of higher emissions. So what we would suggest is, if you save the money by not spending money on fossil fuel subsidies, and if you raise revenues by discouraging bad behavior, then it generates savings and increased revenue, which you can then use to provide support towards those households and those families that actually need that support. So instead of providing blanket support through a subsidy that is broadly and widely available, or instead of providing blanket support through lower costs, it's much better to save that money or raise more revenue and then use the fiscal space that you've created for yourself by providing better targeted support to those people who actually need it.
What do you foresee to be the most significant challenges for Romania in the realm of climate policy?
Well, obviously it's going to be important to reinvigorate the transition away from coal. I mean, right now 60% of energy supplies in Romania are either from nuclear or renewable, but the momentum towards renewables has slowed somewhat, so there's a need to reinvigorate that momentum towards renewables. The grid needs substantial investment in order to be able to cater for increased supply of renewable energy into the market. And the third thing I would say is that in terms of labour market implications of the green energy transition, it's very important to ensure that there is a workforce that is adequately trained and equipped to help drive this green energy transition.
One of the sectors where you saw like we still have a lot to do is regarding state-owned companies. Romania has a lot of unqualified people still, has a lot of unqualified people backed up by parties in high position in state-owned companies, despite having a legislation regarding corporate governance. How do you see this aspect, and what are your recommendations for the Romanian authorities?
The legal framework is there. It's now a matter of implementing it effectively, and we will of course continue to monitor the implementation. As I say, the OECD accession process doesn't just look at the legislation before we make a decision on whether accession can happen. We look at legislation, we look at policies, and we look at practices.